You said we're good, Fred.
We're good. I was waiting for Diane to get back. Okay, we're going to begin. Call the meeting to order. I'd like to say good evening to everyone. It's November 1st, first day of November, 2018, 6:30, and I'd like to welcome everyone to the council meeting for the Village of Royal Palm Beach. Please stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'm going to ask everyone please to remain standing. I'd like us to have a moment of silence in recognition of the awful event, the act of hatred that occurred at a place of worship in Pittsburgh early this week on the weekend. So please join us in a moment of silence and remembrance. Thank you. Please be seated. Okay, on a lighter note, it's an evening when we have an opportunity to recognize the tenure of some of our very valued employees and part of our leadership team. I want to start out tonight by recognizing Mr. Lou Recchio for his 25 years of service to the Village of Royal Palm Beach, but more importantly to the citizens of Royal Palm Beach. Lou Recchio has worked for the village since 1993. He started as a program supervisor. And in 1995, Lou was promoted to Assistant Park and Recreation Director, and he became the Parks and Recreation Director in 1997, and he's been there ever since. Lou's worked tirelessly to improve our recreation programs to make them the premier recreation programs in the county. Lou's a dedicated leader, and he's a friend, and I'm glad to call him a friend, to everyone he comes in contact with. Lou is generally known as just a great guy. And his department and its success is a reflection of his greatness. His smile and disposition are infectious. Wouldn't you agree with that? Anyone who knows Lou? Isn't that so descriptive of him? It is the same dedication to public service that Lou brings to the job every day. Lou, you are definitely an asset to the Parks and Recreation Department and to the village and to the citizens of this village, and we thank you for your continuous hard work. It is a pleasure working with you, and I want 25 more years. You don't have to tell me tonight.
Let me check out your skills. We're very lucky to have you.
Lou, where's your hat?
Lou doesn't have enough hair for 25 years.
I used to have her.
He was 6'2" when he started.
What do you call it, Poppy?
I said it better myself.
From the mouth of babes. We have another award this evening, and this is for Mr. Jamie Wicker. And Jamie's been with the village for 10 years, and this is a 10-year service recognition award, but I want to put into context. Jamie has been a part-time contributor, but he works with us on a part-time basis, but we feel like we get full-time results. Jamie joined the Parks and Recreation Department in October of 2008 as a part-time employee and working nights and weekends. Jamie is our man on the scene for many of our sporting events, as they mostly occur when? On nights and weekends. Now, you're not going to get a lot of folks lining up willing to work nights and weekends. So you begin to get the picture here? Being a full-time employee with the Palm Beach County School District, there are many instances where he has to work a 7-day work week. Being a resident of the village, Jamie takes extra pride in our park systems, and he works diligently to make sure our parks are safe and clean. In the 10 years he has been with us, he has routinely stepped up with extra help whenever it's needed, and Jamie is a dependable and is an asset to the Parks and Recreation Department and to the citizens of this village. And we're so thank you that you're here, and I'm going to say, give us another 10 more years, right? How you doing? I see you out there. We'll give you all a minute. I know you don't want to hear the rest of this exciting agenda. Okay. We'll continue now with reports, and I guess my only report is in the military we'd call it a negative report because there was nothing to report. But no, unfortunately, I was not able to make the read for the record this week. Just was not able to get up that morning. I was not well at all, and I tried, but it wasn't going to happen. So I'm sorry I missed there to be there with my other colleagues who were there, and I'm sure some of you are going to report on that tonight. But I just want to apologize that I wasn't able to make it, wasn't able to be there. With that, I think we'll start with Jan.
Thank you. Good evening. It's okay that you were sick. I read to 3 different classes, so it was really fun.
Picked up the slack.
Picked up the slack, right?
Yeah.
Next man on deck, something like that?
There you go.
Okay.
So I just have one little fun little tool to pass out. I had the pleasure of going to an art conference this past week, and Americans for the Arts is the national organization which helps us all understand how arts can impact a community. Oh. And so they've created this, the Arts and Social Impact Explorer. Now, if you go on their website, americansforthearts.org/social impact, you can click on any of these elements. So the one they printed out here was arts, religion, and spiritual well-being. But if you look at diplomacy, there's tourism, military, or infrastructure, community development, and planning, and transportation, and housing, and agriculture and food, which is the ones we would care about. Then it pulls up some statistics, and then it'll click onto a bigger page giving you lots of impact points. So really, really cool stuff.
Interesting. Okay.
Very interesting.
So that's all I'd like to
That's it?
report.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jeff.
All right, well, let me follow up just quickly on the read for the record. I had a chance to read over at Cypress Trails with Councilman Melendez, and we wound up, I know I read 2 classes, and I think we wound up with a total this year of about 120 for the village staff. And we also engaged one of our nonprofit organizations, Royal Palm Beach Rotary, in the process. And so on the same day, same book, followed all the rules and everything. Right, they added to the mix. And we wound up with 433 people.
So the village gets
kids
credit for that?
Get credit for that. I'm
Okay.
going to verify that, that's legitimate, but last year
Okay.
when Wellington got credit for over 1,000, I think basically they'd reached out to other organizations
organizations.
and did that. So I'll make sure that's the case, and we'll make sure we get
Good, okay.
the right count and that kind of thing. I also attended a Florida DOT District 4 open house that they had Tuesday over at Royal Palm Beach Branch Library. They talked about and were passing out an information sheet on a construction project that they're going to begin probably this month at the intersection of Southern Boulevard, Lyons Road, and Sandsbury, and of course that's adjacent to the fairgrounds and the road that is an entrance to the amphitheater. So it was not too surprising to find, I believe he's the executive director for South Florida Fairgrounds there, talking a lot about what they're going to be doing, when they're going to be doing it, and trying to time it so it doesn't get in the way of major events they're having and that type of thing. Also, our state representative, Matt Wilhite, was there, and there was a lot of conversation about rights of way, looking to the future, and doing something bigger, and we keep talking about that on Southern Boulevard. So we got everybody talking about that, and that's a good thing. So there's the handout with the information on it. They expect to have it completed by summer of 2020. And they'll be adding turn lanes. And anybody who's ever gone west in the evening on Southern Boulevard and gone past the South Florida Fairgrounds, you know that the left turn lane onto Lyons Road tends to back up into the through lane. So adding a turn lane is going to be a big help, I think. And so that's one of those things that will make a big difference on the total flow of traffic. We also, I attended the League of Cities board meeting last week, I guess it was. They had a special presentation on the county's homelessness center and also the centers, and also the county's 10-year plan. I didn't even realize they had a 10-year plan
Be nice.
regarding homelessness.
They do have a 10-year plan.
And it's interesting. In fact, the previous 10-year plan was up this year, so this one goes from 2018 to 2028. It talks about different organizations, everyone included organizations, of course, like the Lewis Center, but also Salvation Army, Harmony House, and others. As I understand it, the Board of County Commissioners has done a workshop, and that workshop will lead to some determinations and adoption of that plan, I think, at some point. And of course, the key is the budgeting that goes along with it. Speaking of funding, of course, part of the discussion was about the city's responsibilities with regard to that, which I think we've all heard from time to time. But it is an interesting and worthwhile to look at the plan. I haven't done that yet, but I would suggest go online, take a look at it. I think it's very informative. The general membership meeting included a rock star that we know, a guy by the name of Lyle, who is our strategic plan facilitator, Lyle Sumek. And Lyle did a presentation, which was an interesting one given the audience, which included Congressman Brian Mast and several state legislators. And the topic of his presentation was, let me see if I can get it right here, evolution of American city and governance versus politics. Now, we may remember, you all may remember, that we've seen the governance versus politics fact sheet or information sheet that he provided to us, in fact, just about every year. So we spent a good amount of time on that. It was interesting, like I say, given the audience. He did a good presentation. It was well received, and it'd be interesting to see if it had any significant impact. The importance of doing both of those functions, though, is really the point that he was trying to make. I already mentioned to read for the record, so I've completed my report.
Oh, okay, very good.
The only report I have is early voting is going on now, and I think this is our last meeting before the 6th Tuesday. I'd encourage people not only to get out and vote, but do their due diligence on studying. There's a lot of amendments and a lot of things in a lot of the amendments. So do your homework beforehand so it won't be as onerous when you get to the polling place. But please, just get out and vote. Thank you.
Good evening. I was with Councilwoman Radusky over at the Western Academy Charter School, so we zigzagged across the hallway. So thank you very much to the school for letting us in, and Mrs. Mariani and Mr. Solsky for allowing me to come in and interrupt their class. But it was really neat just to see the kids and how engaging they were in it and reading the book and their perspective on it. We do have our Veterans Day service on November 11th. It's an evening service at 6 o'clock over at Veterans Park. And then on November 17th, we have our Fall Fantasy Craft Show also at Veterans Park from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m.
Thank you. Great.
Yeah, some time ago, our liaison to the Central Palm Beach County Chamber of Commerce, Councilman Valentes, had given me a study that they're heading up as it relates to State Road Boulevard, Southern Boulevard, not State Road 80. The study seemed a little bit limited in just looking at the State Road 80 corridor. After talking with each of the council members and talking with the chamber president, they've agreed to expand that to be more of a Western Communities mobility study and looking at that east-west movement. So they were going to talk to some of the other partners and talk to the consultant and get a revised scope. When I see that revised scope, their request of us was to participate in the study of tune of $4,000. So if the council's in agreement with that, we'll move down. I'll continue to move down that path to do that.
Do we need a consensus or to a vote on that?
I am looking for the money. It's not in our budget, so
We need to do a vote then if it's not in the budget currently.
it's not allocated in the budget. So
Can we get a motion, and how does the motion need to be stated?
What is it, 2 to 4 or?
$4,000.
more
To
than
allocate
$4,000?
$4,000 for a Western Communities mobility study to be shared with the other partners in the study.
I'd make a motion to allot $4,000 to the chamber mobility study.
Western Communities Mobility Study. Okay.
Second.
Wait, Western Communities?
No, it's your chamber.
It's a central.
It's the
Central Palm Beach.
Central Palm Beach County Chamber of Commerce. The study is a Western
Of the Western
Communities
Communities, okay.
mobility
Just
study.
to give a little more context, the study will focus on a topic that we've been talking about.
Right.
How do you move from east to west without having to have a car? We need to start thinking about different options, and this is, I hope, a step
It'll be included.
in that
yeah.
direction. Oh, we're going to be very much included
Right.
in this process. So we have a motion and a second.
Yep.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, Diane, please let the record show that the
Thank you.
request that was put forth by the village manager for the $4,000 for the West Community East-West Study was approved by vote. Anything else?
That's it, Mayor.
That's
Thank
it?
you very
Okay.
much.
All right, we concluded our report, so let me just interject. Diane, I didn't say it to you before, but please let the record show that all members of council are present for this evening. Okay, that concludes reports, and right now, if anyone has a petition to present to the council, now would be the time to do that. Okay, seeing none, I'm closing the floor for petitions. I do not have any comment cards here for items not on the agenda or items on the consent agenda. So before I close public comment on that, is there anyone who would like to speak who didn't submit a card? Come on up, sir. Is this a non-agenda item? Pardon me? A non-agenda item or? Yeah, non-agenda. Okay, just introduce yourself and.
My name is Dan Swanson. I'm at 116 Ponce de Leon, Royal Palm Beach. I've been a resident of the town for 31 years, 10 years on Sandpiper, and 21 years over here on Ponce de Leon. My concern tonight is the project that they're going to be putting in over there.
I had a feeling that's what it was, but okay.
Well, my wife went to the rendering and seen the rendering, and we already have a flooding problem back there since we've been there. The water comes up behind the houses off the golf course.
Off the golf course, on the back of the house?
From the back of the house, we're on the
Okay.
golf course. And then it comes in and goes right between our neighbors' houses, and actually, my neighbor has been flooded before from that. So that's a high concern of mine. And, well, number one, the first concern is I don't want the project at all, because when we bought over there, we came from the other side,
Right.
which the city at that time bought that property. So that's why we went over here, because we wanted to live on a golf course.
Just clarify what project you're talking about so everyone knows. Specifically, what project are you referring to? that you,
It's the townhouses that they're going to be putting in.
This inquiry that's being made about the townhouses.
I'm sorry. No.
This inquiry that you received.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Well, last Thursday, we got a note on our
All right.
door, And then they
Yeah,
said
a lot of
Thursday
people
was the
did.
night to go down there. And also tonight,
Okay.
you can go down
I
there.
just want to make sure we were clear. It was on the record that that's the issue that you were concerned about.
Yes,
And,
yes.
and I've gotten a lot of questions from citizens, and all I can suggest is attend in and let them know, how you feel about it as a citizen.
Right, and another point is the traffic impact, because right now, we can barely get out of here in the morning as it is,
know.
going out east.
Yeah, I know
I
about
mean, that's gonna be a lot more traffic
Okay.
problem there.
Okay.
And, and also behind my house, on the renderings, they actually have a lake buffer area, and then they have the entranceway road to the project, which will be going right by our houses.
Did they have this meeting already? Because you saw the renderings?
The rendering was last Thursday, and it's
Okay.
actually, the rendering is tonight also.
Okay, okay.
So they're
All right, but you're on record as saying you're opposed to this.
opposed to it.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right.
And another point is the value of our homes. Since we're not on a golf course, but more has to be at least 20 or 25%, I would presume.
Sure.
And another concern is how long would the actual project take? And it's just doesn't seem like it's right, because our side of the golf course, which is 9 holes, is going to have the houses in there and have the condos in there. The other side is going to continue to be a golf course.
Okay, so you're on the bad side of this project.
Yes.
Your
where-
mind, in your
Yes,
opinion.
the bad,
Okay,
yes, you could call
okay.
it that. And
All right.
also, I even heard rumor that the city was possibly going to get that golf course, the 9 holes with the clubhouse. We've heard that rumor.
There are a lot of crazy rumors going around. All I can say is that nothing can be done unless this council lets it happen. Right now, this developer is looking for feedback from the citizens, and they should hopefully appreciate your feedback, but we want to hear what the citizens, what their concerns are. And
And-
if
and
there are
al-
concerns about this, we're going to,
Right, well, I appreciate
Yeah,
that.
okay.
And also, I just lost my train of thought, I'm sorry. It's just very upsetting.
no,
It's very
I get it.
upsetting.
I hear you. I hear you loud and clear. Thank you for coming this evening.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for listening to me.
Okay. Does anyone else would like to comment item not on the agenda? Please come up, ma'am.
Thank you. My name is Jessie Sleek, and I live at 118 Ponce de Leon Street, and I'm here for the same
The
reason.
same reason? Okay.
That Mr. Swanson is here for. I just wanted to state my opinion that I'm opposed to this
Okay.
project going on as well, because the way that they have the renderings, the lake is right at my lot line. And like he said, we get flooded every year. And I'm sorry, I don't believe that they're going to protect our property when they build their lake to make sure it doesn't drain into the houses. I'm pretty sure that it's going to go into ours. And right now, whenever it rains or we get the hurricanes, it comes past my pool and is in my yard, going in between both of our houses
Really?
towards the street.
Okay.
So I'm pretty sure that if they do the project the way that they've got the renderings, the water's going to be in my house.
Let me ask you a question. When the flooding thing happens, is it only when there's excessive rain, or is it just?
Excessive rain.
So we have these torrential, that's when
Yeah.
it becomes a real problem?
Excessive rain, hurricanes.
Okay. Yeah, well,
Okay.
Okay.
So I just wanted to state my opinion that
Okay.
I
Well,
do
thank you
not
very
want
much.
that project either.
Thank
Thank
ma'am.
you.
Okay. You only get one bite at the apple. What is it?
I have one more point if it would be possible.
Come on up. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I got my train
That's
of
okay.
thought back.
Listen, that happens to me too, believe me.
I know, unfortunately, me too. Would it do any good to go to all the residents on Ponce de Leon and get a signature on some sort of petition that stating all the residents do not want?
I would not give you any information, guidance, whether it's good or not good, but as a citizen in your community, that's certainly up to you, and that's something you want to do.
Right, and also if there's anything in our deed restrictions when we bought the property concerning the future development there, because
I don't
we
believe,
bought it on
I don't believe there is, but I don't know, I wouldn't know the answer to that question, so, yeah, there are deed restrictions, though, that are interesting, you're to read them. I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, well, we're going to.
Okay, all right,
Okay, thank you.
you're welcome. Okay, last call, anyone else? No? All right, there's no one else, then I'll close public comment on agenda item, non-agenda items, and on the consent agenda. And with that, I'm going to ask Diane to read the consent agenda. Before I do, though, I want to say in advance, we would like us to pull consent agenda item 3. There's some issues that need to be reviewed and updated for us from our building folks.
I'll read it into the record and then.
Okay.
Number 1, approval of the minutes of the council regular meeting of October 18, 2018. 2, approval and authorization for the mayor to execute the consent to assignment of lease agreement for village-owned property in order to assign the current lease agreement with Creative Kids Club Incorporated, doing business as Kids Club, to Above and Beyond Preschool LLC, in accordance with the terms of the 1996 lease agreement for the 728 plus or minus square foot parcel immediately adjacent to Camellia Park. 3, approval of a special event permit for H.L. Johnson Elementary PTO to hold a fall festival at 1000 Crestwood Boulevard North on November 10, 2018, from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. 4, approval of a special event permit for the Village of Royal Palm Beach to hold a Veterans Day evening service at Veterans Park on Sunday, November 11, 2018, from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. 5, approval of a special event permit for the Village of Royal Palm Beach to hold a Fall Fantasy Craft Fair at Veterans Park on Saturday, November 17, 2018, from 9 a.m. until 1 p.m. 6, approval of a seasonal vendor permit application by Happy Holiday Sencon Incorporated to sell Christmas trees at 10600 Okeechobee Boulevard from November 22nd through December 21st, 2018, between 8 a.m. and 10 p.m. 7, approval of a seasonal vendor permit application for Lowe's Home Improvement to sell Christmas trees and related Christmas items from November 24th through December 23rd, 2018, during regular business hours located at 103 South State Road 7. 8, approval and authorization to purchase 1 vehicle from Allen J. Chevrolet Pontiac Buick GMC Cadillac Incorporated in an amount not to exceed $47,572 by piggybacking the Florida Association of Counties Contract FSA 18-VEL 26.0 chassis FSA 18-VEL 16.0. 9, approval and authorization to purchase 2 vehicles from Duval Ford in an amount not to exceed $66,632 by piggybacking the Florida Association of Counties Contract FSA 18-VEL 26.0 chassis FSA 18-VEL 16.0. 10, approval and authorization to purchase 2 vehicles from Duval Ford in an amount not to exceed $64,144 by piggybacking the Florida Association of Counties Contract FSA 18-VEL 26.0 chassis FSA 18-VEL 16.0.
All right, thank you. All right, so with the exception of consent agenda item 3, are there any other comments? If none, I'll look for a motion.
Motion to approve consent agenda, absent 3.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we have no opposed. Diane, please let the record show consent agenda was approved items 1, 2, and 4 through 7. And now we'll hear about item number 3.
Thank you, Mayor. We had discussed with the applicant earlier today. We did not receive up to this date the information that we needed for the petting zoo. Equine has to have what is termed a Coggins test, and the bunny rabbits and the different animals within the petting zoo have to be certified by a certified veterinarian that these animals do not have any infectious diseases. Sometimes it's a little bit difficult to get a hold of these types of certifications, and we would like to, if we could, get council to condition this item with the condition that the applicant provide us with these certifications and the Coggins test prior to the event, and if they are not able to attain them, that they would not have the petting zoo at this event.
Is there a timeline when you have to receive this?
I believe the event is on a Saturday, so maybe the Friday before, receive it in my offices, or I would suggest before that, so that we can then review the certifications to make sure that they are adequate certifications. Because we did receive a letter from a vet earlier today, maybe yesterday, but it just said that the animals were in general good health. But that doesn't
meet
you know,
the-
make it.
the
It
bar.
doesn't say free from infectious diseases, and we want it to say free from infectious diseases.
Is someone here for the applicant like to speak?
I believe that she has. Would you like to speak? Okay, she's having a little trouble speaking.
You okay?
I'm sorry, I have laryngitis.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Wow.
We need to hear you go on record saying that you would agree to such a condition.
Yes, absolutely. If they don't provide it, we don't want to have the petting zoo.
Okay, all right. So
They'll
you-
replace it with some kind of one of the bounce
Okay.
house things.
That's all we needed to hear.
And Mayor, if we could maybe condition it to receive it by close of business on Wednesday, the 7th,
Yeah,
to
we need to
give
put a
staff 2
specific date in
days
there, right.
to review, and then if there are additional questions, they'll have time to get
Right,
that taken
so-
care of.
Okay, so we'll have a time certain condition. Okay.
Like maybe 4 p.m. on Wednesday, the
Wednesday,
7th.
All right.
Yeah.
Celia?
The only question I had was, they do have a backup plan. Do we need to approve that now? Or is it, if they're replacing the petting zoo with something else in the event that they can't?
Yes, what I'm hearing is that they plan on replacing the petting zoo with some bounce houses of some nature. And if that's okay with council, then that could be part of the approval that that's the replacement for the petting zoo.
Just if whoever can summarize all that in a
Who'd like to
motion.
do that? Selena, come on.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve agenda item number 3 with the provision that the infectious disease certifications we need to have by 4 p.m. on Wednesday before the event, which would be, what is it, the 8th?
The 8th.
7th, the 7th.
The 7th,
Wednesday.
okay.
How many? Let's pick a date.
The 7th, and if those certifications are not received, that the school can use bounce houses in place of the petting zoo.
Second?
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We have no opposed. Diane, please let the record show that consent agenda item number 3 was approved as modified with the additional conditions and approved and agreed to by the applicant. Thank you.
Great.
Okay, good. Take something for that voice. No, I know how that feels. I've been there, believe me.
Terrible.
Okay. All right, that concludes our consent agenda. We're going to go to the regular agenda. Regular agenda item number 1 is a public hearing for second reading and adoption of ordinance number 982, amending Chapter 5, Animals, at Section 5-45, Retail Sale of Dogs, Indoor Cats, in order to eliminate the phase-out period for the retail sale of dog and cats, indoor cats, at existing pet stores or pet supply stores within the village.
Thank you. And as we discussed at the last meeting, this is solely to eliminate the phase-out period for existing pet stores, since we no longer have any pet stores in the village that sell dogs or cats. So, Mayor, unless there's any questions, I'll be happy to read the ordinance title.
Please read title.
Ordinance number 982, an ordinance of the Village Council of the Village of Royal Palm Beach, Florida, amending Chapter 5 Animals at Article 2 Dogs and Cats, Division 1, generally at Section 5-45, retail sale of dogs and or cats, in order to eliminate the amortization period for the retail sale of dogs and or cats at lawfully existing pet stores and pet supply stores within the village, providing that each and every other section and subsection of Chapter 5 Animals shall remain in full force and effect as previously adopted, providing a conflicts clause, a severability clause, and authority to codify, providing an effective date, and for other purposes.
Okay, I do not have any public comment cards on this agenda item R1, but if anyone here would like to comment on this agenda item, now would be the time. Seeing none, I'm closing public comment for agenda item R1 and open up for comment for members on council. If there are no comments, then I'll look for a motion.
I make a motion to approve regular agenda item number 1.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We have no opposed. Diane, please let the record show that the second reading for agenda item R1 was approved 5-0, and we're done with the dogs and the pets being sold in the village. Okay, thank you. Agenda item R2 is also a public hearing for first reading in approval of ordinance number 945, amending Chapter 15, Landscaping and Vegetation Management, to clarify the properties that are required to comply with the village's minimum landscaping requirements and design standards, to clarify remedies and abatement procedures for violations of Chapter 15, and to clarify duties of the Planning and Zoning Department and Community Development Department to amend the process for landscape waivers, to outline requirements for installation and landscaping within village rights of way, and to clarify requirements for vegetation removal permits, to create new requirements for the identification, conservation, and preservation of specimen trees, and clarify that minimum landscaping requirements for single-family lots shall be based on net lot area. So we're doing a lot here, all right? We had a workshop on this a few weeks ago. I'm sure all of you had a lot of thoughts after that. I know I did, and I had several conversations with the village manager about this. And with that, okay.
Oh, yeah. As you said, Mayor, we did have an in-depth conversation at the last council meeting during the workshop. And tonight, Bradford, Rob, and myself and Ray are all here to answer any additional questions you have or to go over any issues that you foresee. The one new item that we want to bring to your attention tonight for your consideration is on the sheet that I passed out to you before the meeting. We're going to be looking at the language that's highlighted in yellow. And specifically, this is to address the discussion at the workshop and then some discussions that you all have had with the village manager in your private meetings about what do we do in the event of a hurricane. And those conversations seem to focus on the new tree replacement schedule. As you remember during the workshop, we talked a lot about changing the one-to-one tree replacement that we currently have to something different. Possibly if a tree is larger, the replacement for that tree, if it's lost, would be more than one tree. It may be 2, 3, or 4 trees. But the question was raised, how fair is that in a hurricane? What if the trees in their yard fall over because of hurricane winds? And is it really right for us to go in after a hurricane and tell a homeowner, hey, you need to replace this tree that fell with 4 trees? So the new language is intended to address that very situation. What it says in here is that if a tree becomes deteriorated, which means it's close to death, it dies, or it's severely injured due to a hurricane event, and there's no ability to rehabilitate that tree, it's not going to be saved, then the homeowner will qualify for back to the one-to-one replacement. So the new replacement schedule would not apply in that situation. In order to qualify for that exemption, a few things do have to happen. There has to be an actual hurricane event. And the way we thought we would determine that is having something, if there's a state of emergency that's been declared for Palm Beach County, that means an actual tropical storm or hurricane is coming towards Palm Beach County. We don't want this to be for just any random rainstorm in the summer months. Also, there needs to be a determination by village staff that the damage was in fact caused by the hurricane. We don't want a situation where somebody maybe is claiming damage from a hurricane when that may not be the case. And then finally, there needs to be a determination by staff that the tree can't be rehabilitated. But once those 3 things happen, then it will be a one-to-one replacement. So we wanted to present that to you all to try to address that concern that you had.
All right, before we delve into the discussion with council, I'd like to give the public a chance to, did you want to add something to that before public comment? Or you want to wait? You sure? Okay. I don't have any comment cards submitted for this agenda item, R2, but if anyone from the public would like to comment on this, now would be the time. Seeing none, then I'm closing public comment for agenda item R2, and we'll open it up for conversation and discussion from members on the council. So I don't have any lights. You want to go first?
I'll go first with, I guess, damn lawyer stuff. Hurricane event. We don't have a definition of it, and a hurricane event to me means a hurricane. That doesn't mean tropical storm. That doesn't mean a terrible storm that knocks stuff down. I think we might want to define it either or have it limited to, a named storm maybe, that there's an state of emergency declared, because we have gotten tropical storms with states of emergency. If it's 74 miles an hour or 73 or whatever it is and it knocks my tree down, I don't understand why we wouldn't want to do that and for someone to fall into that realm. And then what if someone drives their car in the yard and takes out a specimen tree? Is that going to be, they're going to fall into the same category as, you're going to have to replace all these trees, or is that going to be one-to-one? I mean, a property owner might not be able to, I mean, through no fault of their own, something external to their property came on and took care of it and knocked it down. And circumstances like that, I think, should also fall into this. But I can't say I would know how to draft that, Jennifer, but...
We struggled with that because some comments had been made by council members that, you know, what about acts of God in general?
Yeah.
And acts
Lightning
acts
hitting
of
it.
God can be very broad, and we were afraid that if we opened it up to acts of God, then every tree that falls, regardless of
it's
the
wind.
cause, is going to be,
Any
according to the
type of
homeowner,
wind.
an act of God. The fact that the tree died, just the fact it died could be an act of God. So that's why we were trying to limit
That
it.
is an act of God, isn't it?
But then the question becomes, if council wants to go that way and create that many caveats, why do we have this replacement schedule?
All right.
Because you have to, from staff perspective, we have to be able to administer this as well. And it needs to be well articulated as to what's going to qualify as an exemption to get you out of the replacement schedule.
Right.
Jeff?
That's an interesting thought. And I can understand the need to be specific and somewhat limited, because otherwise it could be just used to work around the entire intent of a schedule of trees, especially for specimen trees and that kind of thing. My question was, I want to be sure that I understand. So if whatever special condition we finally decide on applies, then the one-for-one tree replacement would be, say I had a 12-foot in diameter oak and it came down due to a hurricane. I wouldn't be expected to replace it with a 10-inch diameter oak.
Correct.
I'd be doing the minimum, whatever the minimum is.
You would do the minimum, and you would do one. That's
And
right.
one is
Yes.
so, okay, thank you.
Jan?
I'll just say that I think the addition and the clarification makes sense to me. I think it's.
You're okay with the way it's worded? Okay. Selena?
I understand that my concern was also when it's the storms, how you're gonna do that. I didn't even consider, like Councilman Valenta said, is that, you know, my neighbor comes home really early in the morning and hits my tree and knocks it down, and then what do I do? So I think that, I understand though, you can't put so many caveats on it because then it just becomes difficult to,
The exceptions end
Yeah.
up eating up the rule.
right. So I like the changes. I think the staff did a great job going through and taking suggestions that we had, plus what you guys had put into it already. But I think that was one of the big concerns that I had also, was the same thing about the name. Is it a named storm versus a state of emergency?
What we could do to address that is, instead of using the term hurricane event, we could say a named storm event
That
where
would
there
be
is
better.
a state of emergency has been declared. And then
yeah,
it will
that-
cover the tropical storms that receive names and,
Then,
okay.
All right, I'm glad to hear that we need to broaden it a little bit, and I think named storm broadens it. But in terms of the state of emergency, we issue a state of emergency in the village for these named storms, or storms that are coming. So should we go by, when we issue a state of emergency, you mentioned the county, I think.
Well,
I don't want to really depend on the
it
county.
usually-
If they don't
goes
do it,
from-
and we do.
goes from the governor though, doesn't it? He's the
There's
one who
usually
does
Well,
it.
the government,
ripple down
there's a trickle
effect.
down, but there are legal things that go into effect when you do it as, even at your own municipal
I
level.
didn't distinguish, so if for some reason there was an event
I just don't want-
specific to Royal
I don't
Palm
want an
and you
event to
felt you
happen.
needed to do it.
What I don't
then-
want is an event to happen that we thought was severe, where we decided we're going to issue a state of emergency, because we don't have to wait for it to trickle down to do that, okay? They could be wrong, and there's a difference. So I just want to make sure we're covered there. I don't want to lock us into if they didn't do it for whatever reason.
No,
Right.
I wasn't that specific with
Okay, but
state of emergency, so it could be from the state, it could be
Just say any state of emergency that's issued. Don't,
storm event, not,
storm-
because
for
there
a
are
named
states.
storm. No, yeah. I just want to just share what the concern was, certainly was the concern I had, is I didn't want to create a situation where we would create an undue burden on citizens, especially during a time of emergency and crisis, because they could have a lot of other problems worried about. There's some tree they have to replace if there was a bad storm that went through here. We've been fortunate the last few years, for the most part, and hopefully we continue to be fortunate. When you look at some of the devastation that's happened to other places within our state through these storms, it just takes your breath away. So I don't want us to create something that will be an additional adding to the burden that's already created. The scenario of the neighbor or somebody running over the tree, tell me if I'm wrong, at least in that situation, they have a remedy. That what somebody's insurance company is going to pay for that.
That's happened.
Right? But is that a correct assumption? I guess is my question.
I don't
See,
know.
You're
the
uninsured, that ain't helping you.
well, so here's the essence of the point. The point is, the intent of what we were trying to do, and it's been how many years since we looked at this ordinance?
Oh,
25 years?
yeah, so,
Jennifer?
well,
25 years since
2000, wasn't it?
since we looked at this ordinance?
2001 was the last
2001.
update.
Okay. And the intent is to take measures to protect the overall canopy of the village, to protect, which in turn protects our quality of life and has a positive impact on our property values. So that was the overall intent. But in doing that, I don't want us to craft something that's going to create harm for individuals. To me, unless an individual goes out there and purposely chops down one of these trees, okay, malice aforethought, outside of something like that happen, I really would like us to craft something that would hold them harmless otherwise. If they had nothing to do with making that tree go down or get destroyed, if it happened, you use the term act of God, something beyond their control, other than them actually going out there, because that's the problem we've had. The problem we've had is people arbitrarily deciding they want to cut some trees down. And that was the essence of what we were trying to put some controls around. So in doing that, I don't want us to inadvertently create a burden where it could create, a burden situation for citizens. So with that content stated, do we feel that the language that we're looking at right now is going to achieve that? And you've been standing there. I want to give you a chance to talk, Rob. Go ahead.
We're just taking it all in. We're hearing your suggestions. It sounds like, Mr. Mayor, you're talking about any event such as a lightning strike or just eventual death of a tree, which does happen, would then be able to be identified by our professional that we'll have on board as such.
Our arborist.
And then we would take action. It sounds like that's what you're telling us. And
yeah, I wanted to have some common sense in here that we're not locked into something, that we can be compassionate and reasonable, but yet hold accountable those who actually arbitrarily decided to take actions they shouldn't have taken. Yeah.
if that's your desire, well, we do probably need to recraft it just a bit, but I'll leave that to the attorney.
My thought was we were looking to set a public policy that, hey, we're a tree city and trees are a valuable commodity in this community. And if you have a property and you have a plan and whatever you're supposed to have on your property and one of them goes bye-bye, you need to replace it. I thought that was the whole gist of this. I mean, I guess that's for us to decide up here, but that's what I thought the whole big purpose of this was, because it had been so long and we didn't have that, and we didn't have enforcement mechanisms for that to hold someone as, you know, like a car hits a tree in a shopping plaza and then they say, oh, well, we're not going to replace it. There was no teeth or anything for the village to keep.
Well, we did have, but they were replacing it with a 2.5-inch diameter tree. If they didn't like it, they could cut down a 10-inch tree and put a little one back.
Right.
This has them putting more little ones back, or funding the streetscape program, which once it gets funded, we will create approved streetscapes along our public roads and give people trees for their front yards. That's what we're ultimately looking for. But yes, we're lowering the requirement on the residential homes by at least 50%. Our RS3 has a 50% coverage requirement. So, and then we have more allowable coverage on other lots in the village. And so what we're doing is we're saying you don't have to have. You can have half of what you're required with this new ordinance. But that half that now is required, yes, there comes some replacement requirements with it. And I mean, it's difficult when someone loses a 15-inch oak tree and it costs them more than just replacing it with a 2.5-inch oak. That's going to be painful for them. I don't know how we can be compassionate towards that.
We're talking about two different issues now. The issue we were talking about initially was what was the causation factor of the tree being eliminated. Either it was being done illegally, somebody cut it down, which they have to replace it, or an act beyond their control.
No, the way this is
Destroy the
drafted,
trees.
if you do it maliciously and cut it, you could be, on your commercial properties, you can be fined up to $5,000 and the replacement schedule.
Okay.
On your residential properties, it was the replacement schedule that we were looking at.
Yeah, we were just looking
And
Yeah, but I'm not,
And just one other thing to think about. So from a code enforcement perspective, when you're having to go in and you're going to have to prove, we're going to have to prove intent. That gets very difficult because somebody will say, well, I cut the tree down because somebody hit a car. Well, do you have proof that someone hit the car? No, but it did. Are you calling me a liar? Well, no, I'm not. But it gets into that situation of how do we actually enforce that kind
the way
of
you
a
approach
thing?
that is, no, you cut the tree down, end of story.
But unless we have proof, we
You
lost
cut
that
the tree down. You should have took pictures, all right, with the car on top of it. Come on, I mean.
That's reversing the standard, though.
I mean, this is to me, I don't want to, listen, we can have scenarios all night about, you know, let's not go that, let's just make, I just want to make sure the language that we use doesn't create an undue burden on people who have a situation where they already have other problems, because if they have a tree torn down by a hurricane, they probably have other issues they have to deal with as well, all right? God forbid the tree didn't fall on their house. God forbid that it didn't cause a fire, all kinds of things. So I just want to make sure we're not creating something that's going to add to that misery if that happens.
I think we're taking care of the burden.
That's,
We're going to
I'm just,
You're
that's
right.
all I'm saying,
We can
yeah.
show the pictures of where Hurricane Michael went through. Landscaping that area is not their priority.
Not the issue right now,
Right,
yeah.
not the issue. We got that taken care of.
Okay.
But when you throw in lightning bolts and hitting them
Tornadoes.
with cars and tornadoes and other things, that gets a lot more difficult for
It may be, but that's the way it is. We just need to be compassionate enough to, if that's really what happened, to give a chance for people to get that explained and you know, not hold them harmless where it's appropriate. We can't just say, well, here it is. We're just going to say if it's in this little bracket here, because things happen that we have no control over, right? And we use the phrase, an act of God was an act of something, right? That's beyond the human condition, and bad, you know, things happen sometime. I just want to make sure we're holding our citizens harmless when that happens. That's all.
Well, the way not to cause pain would be to reduce the number of trees on the specimen list. The trees on the specimen list is what will cause the pain in the future. So
I find that interesting.
reducing that to what is really important to you as a council, then would be the way to do it, instead of saying we got to be compassionate here when people lose trees.
I don't think that's the answer, reducing the list, because I am not qualified. I don't think anybody up here is qualified to say, well, this is a more important specimen than that one, right? I think the list was a great list. The list represents those special kind of trees that permeate our village. So I don't think we should be saying, let's make the list smaller.
Mr. Mayor, can I throw something
I'm
in
sorry,
here,
go
though?
ahead, go ahead.
Because I reacted the same way I think that you did to the request that we were getting from the staff to decide whether we wanted to keep all 31 specimen trees on a list. My first comment was what you just said, and that was, I'm not an expert on this. I really don't have, give me a basis for deciding whether 31's the right number, or those, more importantly, those specific trees are the right trees. As the staff always does, they provided us with more information. We actually have pictures of these trees. But I said, I'm still struggling with this thing. I mean, I said, you really don't want my personal opinion on this. And it was more along the lines of, well, there are certain characteristics that some of these trees represent that the other ones don't. For example, the larger diameter trees, the species that get larger, provide a lot of shade. They provide a large canopy. If that's one of the things that we're trying to maintain, then maybe we should just keep those specimen trees that have the larger diameter and let the smaller ones go. The smaller ones, for the most part, as I've found out by looking at pictures and also talking to a couple of friends of mine who had worked for the Forest Service, turns out that they're mostly flowering trees, and so there's not much shade involved, and oftentimes they are bare. So I guess it came down to, in conversations with the staff, for asking us, well, what are our priorities here? Are we looking for trying to really, by that specimen list, trying to make sure we maintain shade, canopy, and I think the other was wind protection as two. We had another category, and that was the beauty as a result of the flowering plant. So if we wanted to reduce that list to reduce the financial impact, we could do it just by saying, we're going after the large trees, large canopies, and the ones that provide wind protection. So
And I will say that we also, soil erosion, and we also picked trees that, if you remember, several years ago, we had to get rid of our environmental sensitive ordinance because it conflicted, it was a repetitive enforcement that the state was doing.
Yeah.
So, but the trees that were in those are the cypress trees, and some of those we have on the list to protect those areas a little bit.
To quote the Lorax, who's going to speak for the trees? I don't think we should decide you should live and you should die. So let's just, right. So why
They're
don't
not
we?
the one slur over here.
Well,
Exactly. So instead of saying like, let's alleviate these or eliminate these trees or whatever, I think, what I'm hearing is from your concern is that if there is that concern of a natural disaster, we don't want to put on an extra burden onto that. So what I have found in those situations, like with Matthew and some of the other hurricanes, that code enforcement has been very,
Accommodating.
yes, and understanding of that as well. So maybe that's you're not going to go out the next day and start citing people for it. I mean, I find you very compassionate to realize the situation we're in. So if that's the issue that we're going back and forth on, I think that's a code enforcement issue as to when do you start citing and then how much time do you give to that point to replace it. And I'd rather that than start eliminating trees off the list.
Yeah, I don't think we should limit. But sub-item 3 says code enforcement will in fact do in a review investigative process. Is that accurately stated?
Well, code enforcement's relabeled damage assessment team after storms. And,
Oh yeah, they're busy assessing all the other damage.
Yes, and then we do a very extensive review of all the public and private property within Royal Palm Beach, and we have within 24 hours we will have an extensive
Okay.
the
next.
right. So
list of pictures of
Going-
all the damage.
thank you. Sorry. Going back to the specimen list, if I understand it correctly, and maybe I don't, you can correct me, the specimen list says you could wind up having to replace more than just that one tree if that type of tree is on the specimen list. I mean, that's the issue. It's not a live or die that tree. It's a question of whether you may be required to replace it with 2 trees, 3 trees, 4 trees, all the way up to like 6 trees. That's a big deal on that specimen list, and that's where the cost comes in.
But no, the language they're saying here.
Yeah, but
makes it a one
so
for
we
one.
keep bouncing back and
You're,
forth.
you're,
That's exactly
you're
my
correct,
point, yeah.
Councilman Hamari. Yes,
That's my
specimen trees, if they're designated as specimen, they have to be replaced according to the replacement schedule, regardless of whether they're required. You're giving that extra protection. So say somebody only needs 2 trees on their property, and they have 2 trees and they have a specimen, the specimen dies, they have to replace that specimen according to the replacement schedule.
Which could be more than one
Could
tree.
be more than one.
But not if it's not a cause of them.
Right.
That's the point we keep missing here. And I thought your language said if it was a natural cause, or you used the term hurricane, there is only a 1-for-1 replacement. Am I misunderstanding that?
Oh, that's
We
right.
drafted it.
Yeah.
We talked internally and we drafted it as a hurricane event because that is the one we can actually verify.
And I think the issue we're getting around here is, well, a hurricane is what, and then we said name storm, and then, and then we said, well, what about if something unnatural happens that they're not controlling, right? I think it's clear, and I think that in terms of however we word this, our enforcement model has to be one of compassion and verifying that, in fact, the person, the owner of the home was not the cause of the tree being lost. That's really the point. And if you're telling me this language here does that, I'm fine with that. If that language doesn't do that, then we need to go back to the drawing boards.
I don't think it does that.
We need to go back to the drawing boards because that's the intent. That's the intent, I think anyway, on what we should be looking to do here. So I don't want to create unnecessary burdens for people. I mean, we decided to open up this ordinance, and I think our intentions are good intentions. I think people who arbitrarily destroy trees they shouldn't be destroying should be held accountable for that. And that's all well and good. But I don't want us to go to the extent where now we've created something that we didn't have before. all right, that's going to become a burden. And if things happen to people's trees, these trees, and a person wasn't the cause of that, they shouldn't be held accountable in that regard. I don't think that's right. Now, just want to let everybody on council know that there will be a test at the end of the meeting. You have to remember the scientific names of at least 5 of the trees that are on the specimen list.
I wish you had told me in advance.
You would.
I would have studied.
Yeah, you'd have been studying. Yeah, all right. You can't use your Google. You can't Google, right? No, I'm joking. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Anyway, so where are we? Jan, I'm sorry. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
so I'm thinking about all these one-offs that could happen. And a hurricane or a natural disaster, I mean, the hurricane, a named storm, that makes sense. But when we get into, it wasn't my responsibility that the tree fell down, you can come up with probably 20 different ways or reasons why the tree's now down, but I'm the property owner and I didn't cause it. Is there a way to still work within our policy that we have and planning and zoning take their natural course, and then the magistrate figure it out at the end?
I don't know.
Because in a worst case scenario, right?
Was let them plead their case?
Some neighbor has a fight with their neighbor and they know, well, I'm gonna go chop down their tree when they're not home. And now you have somebody guilty, somebody not.
Yeah, but in that case, that person who owns the home, who lost the tree, has somebody that can be held accountable. Somebody else did it. They didn't do it, but somebody else did it. They have a remedy. There's a remedy there for the homeowner, okay? There's no remedy for the homeowner if it's something unnatural happens and they can't go, well, God did it. And we say, oh, we don't recognize that.
Here's one of the problems with this. If the homeowner wasn't responsible, if you talk to an arborist, first of all, the trees we picked are all natural to this area. They're natural to this area because they've survived the hurricanes in this area. If you properly trim and take care of your tree and have it grown in the right place, there's not a whole lot of reasons that tree will ever come down. But if you're not pruning, and this ordinance has a whole lot on pruning and pruning properly. So the biggest cause of trees coming down is them not being pruned properly or them being hat-racked. That's caused by the owner.
But that's very identifiable. I don't think that's an area of dispute.
But what's going to happen is when you get into code enforcement, if you're looking for compassion on the property owner, it wasn't caused by them. Well, just their improper maintenance of the tree over time would be a cause for the tree to fall down.
Okay, that's a very broad statement, improper maintenance. What does that mean? I mean...
That means hat-racking the thing. That means not thinning it out.
No.
That
wait a minute. Hat-racking...
It's very specific in the ordinance what that means.
We've had this issue for years where people would hat-rack their trees, but we really, because our ordinance didn't have the teeth in it, couldn't really do a lot about it. Now we're going to be able to do something about that because when Rob's people see that a tree was hat-racked, they got him dead to rights. The owner did that. That's not in question.
No, we did. It was an easy ordinance to administer. If you cut a limb more than 3 inches, it was hat-racked. And we took them to the magistrate and said they were hat-racked. And we proved that they were hat-racked because you got a limb that's bigger than 3 inches in diameter. And then what happened from that point is, as a lot of branches grow out from that point, it becomes a weaker tree at that point, and it fails. What our magistrate was doing and what our code enforcement was doing was saying, if the tree lived from that hat-racking, we'll let it go. Then we end up with a tree that's actually more unsafe. And actually, the arborists were telling us, I would rather the magistrate tell us to just kill the tree and take it out. Yeah. And I don't care if it comes back nice and green and with a nice lollipop shape. We'd rather have it taken out because it's not going to be a healthy tree and it's not going to be a strong tree as time goes on. That's why we have the whole pruning section in here. And actually, the loss of trees is mostly because of improper maintenance of the tree.
All right, you just said something interesting. What you just described sounds like a technical decision that an arborist should make, not the magistrate.
And that's why we put in the ordinance for the arborist to make those decisions for us, instead of the magistrate and code enforcement saying, okay, there's green leaves still on it. We're gonna check it again in 6 months and see if the green leaves are more.
It improves our ability to effectively implement and prosecute that kind of a problem. Is what you're saying. That's one of the goals of making changes.
It will come with, it kind of comes without compassion, though.
Well, no. If it's a technical determination that the arborist says it was hat-racked, that's it. It wasn't the judicial process that decided it. It was the technical determination. But you keep this point about maintenance. Let me ask this. How much time has to go by where a tree is not maintained properly before it gets problems? And is that something that your people are going to be looking for in advance and letting people have warning saying, hey, you're not maintaining this tree right, all right? So you gave them a
Sounds
year's
way
notice
too
to start
broad.
doing something right before it gets to the point where it falls down because it wasn't maintained right. And then the citizen's going to say to you, well, nobody told me I wasn't maintaining it right. What do you do then? I mean, how does that work in reality, I guess?
I don't want to make Rob the tree police.
That's not the plan of our enforcement. We don't have the resources to do that.
This will make him the tree police.
No,
And if he's not the tree police, who's the tree police?
We will respond to retroactively tree abuse, whether they trim it or hat rack it in violation of the code.
Okay.
I think the issue is, I mean, there's definitely situations, it seems everyone here up in the council, especially when there's natural disasters and it's not the fault of the property owner. But then, as Jan pointed out, I mean, you get to a certain point, I mean, you're going to have a problem in code enforcement every single time because everyone's going to come up with an excuse. I mean, I'm renting my house out. Oh, the renters did it. Am I off the hook now because the renter took down one of my trees?
No, you're not.
That doesn't make sense.
You know you're not off the hook if your renter did it. You're on the hook if you're the owner. So that's not a good example.
Well, the neighbor hit it with a car.
Then you follow an insurance claim.
He's
against your neighbor.
uninsured. I can't get paid. It's still
Well,
not
then
my
your
fault.
insurance company pays for
It's
it.
still going to be.
We want to continue. How many of these we're going to do with these
Right,
scenarios?
we can
We'll be
do
here
as
all
many
night.
as we want, but
We'll
that's the
be here
thing.
all
We
night.
don't want to make an exception that's going to swallow the rule, but we do, I think, want some type of exceptions. Otherwise, there's going to be no enforcement
All right.
power to this at all. And I don't know that, obviously, sitting up here, we're going to have the answer tonight, but we need to think about, as the mayor points out, I mean, we definitely don't want to burden people or overly burden them, but are we going to make the policy decision that trees are important, and if you're taking down these specimen trees, which are big trees and important trees in our community, that they got to be replaced? And if we don't think that that's a good public policy, then we shouldn't go that way.
So one of the things that occurred to me is that we could always modify this ordinance. It would be good, I think, to start someplace, and it sounds like we're pretty close, and especially with the exception kind of a consideration here. We all recognize we're trying not to make someone's life more miserable than it just was with a hurricane coming through and a tree going down and that kind of stuff. If we could just find a word maybe to replace or a phrase to replace hurricane event, and again, with the thought in mind that if we start to see a lot of people even abusing that or finding a way to abuse that, if we have to tighten it, we could do that after the fact. At least that way we might be able to get an ordinance in place. Just a suggestion.
So where do we go from here?
Well, we're kind of looking, we're trying to come up with, so we need direction tonight, or we need to come back with another first reading. So in listening to you, Jennifer wrote down some more things here. Vandalism, car accident,
The named storm event.
a named storm event, or lightning. The vandalism one's the one that gives me the most concern, because you can vandalize your own tree and then deny you ever did it. So that would be the toughest. The car accident, storm event, and lightning. I mean,
So maybe we should just take vandalism off that list and use the other.
Well,
No?
car accident, too.
we can leave car accident.
Oh,
That
car
one,
accident.
we have car accidents in our own trees. We
Yeah.
do get reimbursed for them.
Yeah.
We have a company paying us for a bunch of trees out on State Road 80 that
Yeah,
they took out.
there was a remedy there. There's a remedy.
And
Yeah.
the nice thing about that, if somebody did make an insurance claim, that would be documentation that
It would
they
be-
would
yeah,
provide to us, and we would say,
absolutely.
yes,
All
the
right.
car did hit
Yeah,
the tree.
There's a
and-
remedy. There's a remedy.
Can I ask, would it be too much to expect a trained arborist to be able to forensically tell us how this tree got injured?
You mean like CSI?
Wouldn't a professional be able to tell us that was
Free
intentionally done, or if in fact it did get caused by a vehicle? Because if the question comes up, and it will, that would be my route of response. I would seek out my professional
That
consultant
expertise, yeah.
to make that initial determination.
Why didn't you say that an hour ago then?
I thought we summarized the statements as they were coming through, but
Okay. Everything Rob said plus the new wording, I think it's sincere. What do you think?
All right, and I have to write it, so if I could have a little more clarification.
All right, with the language you were using, and I think we said not, don't put the vandalism, but everything else?
So name, storm event, car accident, or lightning, the three. And like Councilman Hamera said, if we encounter another one that is a really good exception, we can
And-
always.
Tornado?
And Code Enforcement says that they will utilize the expertise of the arborist to make the, some official determinations if
Storm
you
events
think
with
it's
the-
something that you need to do, right?
That would be my course of action.
Okay, so that sounds, we feel reasonable with that, right? Sure. Okay.
So those three.
Do we need to put any language that supports what he just said, or is it, okay?
What
Well,
we have,
that's how it's spelled out in our ordinance.
that's how it's already spelled
These
out.
Already in
these
there.
are just more parameters.
Okay, okay.
And you'll see too, in the new language we proposed, there has to be some kind of confirmation by the planning and zoning department that these things happened and the tree can't be rehabilitated, and Bradford fully intended on using the arborist to do that.
Okay. Everybody okay with that?
So we'll be bringing it back then, Jennifer.
So you're gonna
Is
bring
that
it back? All right,
for
so
first reading?
No,
No action tonight then?
No, if you include that in the motion to approve on first reading, those three, the
And
name,
we can
storm
do the- we
event
can do
with
a-
the declaration of emergency, lightning and car
Okay.
accidents, I can then bring it back
For a
for
second
second
reading.
reading. I
Why don't
need the
we-
motion to be
all right, if somebody
specific.
can give a motion that
my
says what she just said. Come on, Richard, come on.
Okay.
So just,
Hold it.
just before
Okay, go ahead.
you work your magic, from the conversation, I'm going to conclude then that we want to keep all 31 specimen trees in the table as is. Is that right? Okay. Thank you.
Only if you remember the scientific names. Okay, Richard, you're on.
I'll make a motion to approve on first reading ordinance number 945 with the revisions or amendments, how do I call them, Jennifer? Amendments on the language regarding the replacement schedule and the one-for-one on specimen trees to include not only, or I guess change the term of hurricane event to include named windstorm event, lightning, and
Car accidents.
car accidents.
Or automobile accidents, yes.
Automobile accidents is better.
All right. Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a
I
second.
do need to read it.
You have to read by title. Go ahead.
And I'm sorry, it's very long.
That's okay. This is longer than what I had to read.
It
Sorry.
is, unfortunately.
Good, you got the motion.
Ordinance number 945, an ordinance of the Village Council of the Village of Royal Palm Beach, Florida, amending Chapter 15, Landscaping and Vegetation Management of the Code of Ordinances of the Village of Royal Palm Beach at Article 1 in general in order to modify definitions relating to tree preservation, to clarify the properties that are required to comply with the minimum landscaping requirements and design standards contained in the chapter, to specify that violations of this chapter may subject the violator to certain non-exclusive remedies, and to clarify that prohibited and/or restricted plant species may not be planted, installed, or maintained in the village except as permitted in this chapter. Further amending Article 2, Administration Waivers and General Standards to provide that the Planning and Zoning Commission shall review and make recommendations to the Village Council regarding applications for landscape waivers, to further outline the notice requirements for public hearings on requests for landscape waivers, and to outline the requirements for installation of vegetation within village rights-of-way. Further amending Article 3, Vegetation Management to clarify abatement procedures of the village. Further amending Article 4, Vegetation Protection and Preservation to modify vegetation removal permit requirements and to provide for new tree preservation requirements. Further amending Article 5, Design Standards to clarify which properties are required to submit landscape plans for review, and to clarify that minimum landscaping requirements for single-family lots shall be based on net lot area. Further amending multiple code sections to clarify the duties of both the Community Development Director and Planning and Zoning Director with respect to enforcing said chapter, providing that each and every other section and subsection of Chapter 15 Landscaping and Vegetation Management shall remain in full force and effect as previously adopted, providing a conflicts clause, a severability clause, and authority to codify, providing an effective date, and for other purposes. Thank you.
Okay. We do have a motion and we do have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? If you have no opposed, Diane, please show that we did in fact approve the first reading for the agenda item R2, 5-0. Thank you all for all of your input and comments on this. I thought it was a good conversation. Okay, agenda item R3 is also a public hearing and first reading for reading and approval of ordinance number 981, amending Chapter 17, offense and miscellaneous provisions at the new at Section 17-13, public parks and hours of operation. In order to add new time limit requirements for park facility usage and to add new regulations relating to private instruction and private teaching lessons in village parks. Lou.
He's here to answer any questions. He can tell you exactly what's been going on out in the field.
Give us the
but
scoop, Lou.
Yes, please.
Then I can go over the specifics of the ordinance.
First of all, this is an item that was on your strategic plan this year. And basically what it is in the past, we've had major issues with some of our athletic facilities, mainly the tennis courts, the batting cages. People go in and they monopolize the use of those facilities. And sometimes when the public wants to get onto the courts, we got somebody out there that's actually getting paid to do instruction. And it's been very difficult to control that. You know, like, as an example, on the tennis courts, we have a pro that's on site. And there's a number of times that other people, private citizens, are coming in and we know they're conducting business, but we can't prove it. So basically, we were looking at, you know, putting together an ordinance that'll give us some teeth, so that we can approach them and we can sign it properly, that there is a time limit. And if there are people waiting to use the facility, they need to leave, and then they can always come back. But to monopolize the facility and not let anybody else use it, it's becoming more and more of a problem.
Is it more of a problem on the tennis courts than the baseball?
Tennis courts is number one.
Okay.
Yes. Like I say, we have a pro there, and there's times that he's getting in a confrontation with a private citizen who, again, you know, we know they're conducting business, but there's no way of proving it.
Okay, how do we enforce this going forward?
Well, again, we can put a sign up and let them know what the time limits are. And if they want to conduct a business outside of the realm of our pro that's on site, because we do try to leave 2 of the 6 courts open all the time for the public. But we'll be able to sign this and let them know if they're going to do something like this, they can come in and they can get a permit and they can lease that court.
They can?
Yes, they can.
Okay.
It's in a rate schedule where the different facilities have a rate, whether it's hourly or daily. So they have that option. It also occurs over at the driving range. Again, we had a pro out there, but he's conducting business, and then some, you know, it could be a resident, could be a non-resident coming out there, and again, they're giving lessons. And it kind of infringes on the others.
You said we have a pro. Are you saying the village has somebody?
We had a pro.
We had a, okay.
Yes, and he was on a contract.
We don't anymore?
No.
Okay.
No. Again, because the issue was we couldn't control anybody else coming in.
Okay.
Yeah. And hopefully, like I say, this will give us a little, you know, a bite that we can, you know, we have something to back us up. Okay. Now they're going against the ordinance.
But just for clarification, when you say a pro, you're referring to another individual who's running his business off the court, off the tennis court, not the individual that the village was.
Right. We can put a sign out there that states, you know, the instruction is by our pro who has an ID, who's gone through the process of getting a contract with the village. And again, what we're finding out is the private citizen is going out there and circumventing the whole system.
And one thing to note too, another reason this is such a problem is our pro and the people that actually rent our facilities through the proper process, they're required to provide proof of insurance, indemnification of the village in the event something were to go wrong while they were out there. The people that are coming in and running their businesses out of our courts and our fields and are circumventing our process are not giving us insurance. They're not giving us the indemnification that we require. And so this ordinance is designed to make sure everyone's playing with the same set of rules. They're all on the same level. And we feel like this is really essential to make sure the village is being protected from that insurance perspective too, because that's just not happening right now.
Okay.
So the technical stuff of the ordinance, You had mentioned, Mayor, I think, how do you enforce this? Well, we have a section in here that says private instruction or teaching lessons without a rental agreement with the village is prohibited. And it's the teaching lessons for compensation.
All right, so they can't just walk out there.
Yeah, if it's a grandfather wanting to teach his grandson how to play golf, that's not it.
I'm saying professional who's getting paid to teach.
Correct.
Okay.
And if we aren't able to prove the compensation part of it,
Yeah.
then we're going to go to the second part of the ordinance, which is the time limits. You only get 1 hour if other people are waiting. If other people are waiting, you have to vacate that court and make sure that the person who's waiting gets to use it first. You can return later, and we're going to have sign-in sheets, for the courts. But that way, if we can't prove the compensation aspect, we will rely on the time limit aspect. There are going to be fines proposed. You'll see that at the next council meeting for second reading, because we're going to have to amend our fee schedule to do this. But under the statutes, we have to provide a fine amount in the event the violation is contested, and then a fine amount if it's not contested. And just so you know, we're going to be proposing $100 per violation if it's contested. If it's not contested, it will be $75. But you'll see that at the next meeting.
Okay. Does that go through the magistrate?
This is actually going to county court. This is considered a citation. Wow. Our magistrate only is able to review violations that occur on private property.
So
because this is a public property situation, it'll have to go to court.
Fees.
Well, we win court fees if we win the case.
Okay.
We do understand there will be costs involved in prosecuting them. Our hope, though, is that the tennis instructor and any other private instructor will just come in and do the rental agreement with the village. That's much easier for everybody.
Question about other courts, right? So we have volleyball courts and basketball courts, and this ordinance would include all of those other courts. So where would, just logistics, where would the volleyball court sign-in sheet be, or a basketball court sign-in sheet be?
Well, basically, they would have to come to the rec center and get a permit for usage of that time. The issues that we are confronting now is not as much the volleyball courts, because it's usually a team event. They're going out to use it, but if they want to reserve a volleyball court at a specific time, they need to come in and reserve it. Otherwise, it's open to the public. If there's nobody waiting, we have not come up to a situation where somebody is actually going out there and getting paid to conduct a volleyball camp.
But if we did have an issue where we had queuing of people waiting for let's say the volleyball courts at Robner Park, then we would have to create some type of sign-in, whether some kind of sign-in sheet at that location. And then what would happen if somebody would come up, sign up, and the people that were on the court couldn't be on there for more than an hour from that point.
Or just do it on the website.
Well, it's really going to be more about coming up to the court and people being there,
Right.
and then you're going to have to wait your hour,
Right.
But there would have to be something there, somewhat official, where you're writing your name down, and the ordinance would have to be with the rules right there. We don't have that waiting queuing problem anywhere but the tennis courts and the golf.
Tennis is the issue.
I know Sunday morning they used to be pretty crowded out at Robner on the park, but I don't know that there were people waiting to use it.
Yeah.
What's that other sport they use the tennis court for?
Pickleball.
Pickleball. Are people playing pickleball?
Well, right now they're playing in the gymnasium.
Okay.
Yeah, it's very popular, and that'll be something down the line.
We'll hear more about that later, huh?
Huh?
Okay.
Yeah, it's very popular.
Okay. I'm going to open it up for public comment. Yeah. I don't have any. Have no comment cards submitted for agenda item R3. But anyone here who would like to comment on this agenda item, come on down.
Hi again. My grandson and I, we go out and use the golf course facility, which is beautiful, and we were actually approached by a pro to give my grandson lessons.
On a golf course?
Yeah, at the golf driving range.
You got it for the record.
Dan Swanson, 116 Ponce de Leon, Royal Palm Beach. So what this gentleman is saying about the pros coming in is exactly what's happening.
it's a problem. And we're trying to keep it from getting out of hand. But okay, but thanks for that input. Appreciate it. Anything else, Lou? All right. So, anyone else going once, going twice, who would like to comment? Seeing none, I'm closing public comment on agenda item R3. And comments from members of council? Further comments? No? Read by title.
Thank you. This is ordinance number 981, an ordinance of the Village Council of the Village of Royal Palm Beach, Florida, amending Chapter 17 offenses and miscellaneous provisions at Article 1 in general at Section 17-13 Public Parks Hours of Operation in order to add new time limit requirements for park facility usage and to add new regulations relating to private instruction and private teaching lessons in village parks, providing that each and every other section and subsection of Chapter 17 offenses and miscellaneous provisions shall remain in full force and effect as previously adopted, providing a conflicts clause, a severability clause, and authority to codify, providing an effective date and further purposes. Thank you.
Okay, if there are no further comments from members on council, I'll look for a motion.
Motion to approve ordinance number 981.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We have no opposed. Diana, please let the record show that agenda item R3 was approved 5-0, first reading. And that concludes our agenda. It was mentioned earlier in our reports that we won't meet again before the election next Tuesday, so we just encourage everyone to go out and vote and make sure you take time to study the 13 amendments that are on the ballot, so you have an opportunity to vote what it is you think you'd like to do. Lou, you have more?
Yeah, if I may, on a
Sure.
different subject. Selena had brought up the fact about Veterans Day. I just want to let you know that from 3:30 to 5, the American Legion is conducting
Free hot dogs
a
and,
barbecue for all the veterans and their families,
that's very nice.
free of charge, okay?
Okay,
Great.
good.
Thank you.
Or is it open?
Veterans and their families. Yep.
So is that open?
Well, yeah. Because
Okay, anything else? Nothing else? Thank you all this evening. We stand adjourned.